On this episode of the Path to Success podcast, I had an opportunity to sit down with Jim Flint. Jim owns a local search group, and he's also an avid crypto investor. He's been married for quite a long time. On this episode, we spend time with Jim to talk about how to successfully start a business after a layoff, how to hire people and grow at scale, eliminate the white noise, really focus on relationships that are important to him. And more importantly, Jim shares on how valuable family is in order to maintain sanity while you're growing a business. So if you are looking forward to becoming successful in business or in your family life, tune in. Today, we've got Jim Flint in the podcast studio. Hey, Jim, it's great to have you in here, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy. Appreciate
it. Absolutely. So I met Jim. He was actually introduced by our internal recruiting manager, Jacqueline, who I think you guys, may have met in a previous life. She said you even tried to hire her.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you see talent, you know people are good. We were at dinner, my wife and I, and I think we're at El Tiempo on Washington Avenue, which was a few blocks away from where my business was at the time, pre-pandemic. And there's a thing, when I used to work for Nike, either you get it or you don't. And she gets it. So do you.
She absolutely gets it. Well, I'm glad that she met you, man, because our brief call last week, we got open, we got vulnerable. And, I think within the first 5 minutes, we said, hey, let's go sit down for a 1-hour chat and get to know each other a little bit better. So it's great to have you in here, man. Jim, I want you to give me just a quick intro. Who are you? What do you do? What's your business? Let the listeners in.
So I created Local Search Group Digital Marketing. It's been in existence now for 14 years, and it initially had investors, bought out the investors, which was a good indication of the relationship that I had established over the years working with them. Prior to that, spent my time at Nike Corporate and Toyota Corporate. Have an MBA in marketing from TCU. Had a great football season last season, so I'm a big sports fan. Played college baseball, and now I compete in the field in the sport of business.
Well, there you go, and you sound like a competitive guy. And from the research that I did, man, it sounds like you're winning. So, give me some insight. So, this is a podcast where I interview successful people. And success can come in a variety of different packages, right? There's success in politics, success in athletics, success in business, success in investing, success in so many different facets of life. And so, the purpose of today is I want to get to learn a little bit more about you, and I want to learn about your journey and how you've kind of paved that path to success. And so the first question that I want to ask you is, how did you guys become a repeat fastest growing agency in Texas? Tell me a little bit about that whole process, resources that you invested in, and how were you guys able to get that several years in a row?
Yeah, we worked on scale. And so one of the things when you have scale and you have the wind at your back, and to say, this is where we can cue Drake, started at the bottom, now we're here. Because I've talked to a lot of people in places and universities, and they always ask, like, when's the best time to start the business? And I'm like, after you have some experience, and I had some experience, and when you know that it's at the bottom. I played college baseball with Reed Ryan. He managed the Astros. He took the job after they'd lost 100 games. And I kind of got it from him because I asked him, I said, are you sure you want to take on the Astros? I mean, they'd lost 108, 105, and they were really a doormat at that time. And he said, look, all that can happen, right, is it can get better from here, or I can go back to doing what I was doing before. Now, they worked together as a team, and they built the thing out. They won the World Series. So, he had a lot of success. So being the guy that I was like, hey, he inspired me. My teammate inspired me. And I realized, hey, look, this whole car industry, because I started the company Local Search Group in 2010, and we mostly do automotive digital marketing. Okay. And we were at the bottom. The industry had cratered. We'd just done Cash for Clunkers, if you remember that deal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so this thing called Google, the dealers didn't like. The thing called Internet, they didn't know if it was going to make it. Did Facebook sell cars, right? All those things were happening. Yep. And so I realized, given the experiences I'd had, that I was really well equipped. I didn't think it could go lower, and if it did, I was like, what am I going to do? Right? Like, I'm just going to ride this thing out as far as I can. And so once I knew I was in the place I wanted to be and that it was at a place that could only go up from here, I was like, I needed to find the capital to get me to the next phase.
So when you say the bottom, you're obviously talking about the bottom of the economy market in the automotive industry. Let's talk about how you exited a position where clearly you were high six figures. Were you laid off? Was the position eliminated? Give me some insight into that whole process.
Yeah, I had worked at Toyota for 7 years in their regional sales office. Before that, worked in Nissans, worked in Nikes. And so during that period, I'd been in an upcycle, economically speaking. So then Lehman Brothers hits while we're going through the hurricane here in Houston. So some of that disruption.
July, August, September 08.
September 08-ish. It might have been Ike, I believe, correct? Yeah. And so I was kind of oblivious to what was going on. And then by October, right, we had a reduction in force, of which I was a part of. I was on the advertising side. And so those are the first things to go. And it's ironic now that I'm still in advertising, right? But as I worked at retail automotive, my first thought was, how do I turn an expense portion of the income statement into a profitable section of the income statement? And so I thought I knew scale, right? But until you're fighting for and creating something in a bootstrapped way, like there was no J curve, right? J curves when the investor puts the money in, like, oh, the horizon will be 2 years or 3 years. No, I was like, hey, look, we're going to put in capital. You're going to make money from the start. If you want to keep this company going, right? This is my board. Just keep making money, right? And so it makes you make tough decisions, right? You have to be willing to fail, and then you have to be able to address your failures.
Absolutely. And, you know, when it's your money on the line instead of corporate America, Toyota Motor Corporation, right? You know, I know myself, I tended to act quickly, right? You pivot quickly, you're a little bit more agile. So great. So one of the things that I heard right there is, hey, really wasn't expecting it. There was a reduction in force. Probably whenever it happened, the day they served you with those papers, you thought, holy shit, this is the worst day of my life. And then you fast forward, wow, 13 years, it's probably been one of the most successful, pivoting, life-changing events that catapulted you to the path to success.
You know, it's funny. And I hear a lot of people say that where they're like, oh, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm not going to go that far. It wasn't the best thing that happened to me. What it was though, like, and I think I practice what I call like iceberg philosophies. When I talk to people like you, there's so much more than what we're seeing here or what we're saying here. There's what experiences you've had, and I like to get to know people and share them. And as you're asking me today, as I'm being, on the other side of the mic, the deal for me is I just, on the iceberg level, I've gotten back up more times than I've been knocked down. And that's the thing, like each time, that's the deal for me. Like it wasn't the end. It wasn't the best experience I've ever had because there was a lot of confidence components that get knocked down, right? Like you believe in something, you know something, you're doing something. I was the youngest director in the company at the time. And so some of that ambition gets displaced, then it gets replaced, and then you get to decide how you want to proceed. And I do know that those experiences have made me appreciate what it is to grow. And no matter what I'm doing, and this is my motivative skill set, whether it's growing an agency, which really is a reflection of growing the company, the companies I'm working with and for, and then growing your associates, you can see them take on too much responsibility. You can see the growing pains. You can help them through it. You can try to reduce it. You can try to scale it. You can add personnel. There's so many things. And to be able to work with some of the talented people that I worked through the years is one of the I'm most proud of. It's incredible. And to talk to, like guys like you that I'm able to break bread with and have conversations because my mind is constantly going.
Well, that's a good problem to have whenever you're an entrepreneur, right? We're the idea guys, the visionaries, right? And so tell me a little bit about who helps you execute your vision whenever your mind is constantly going and you say, hey, I need to start this business unit or I need to develop a strategy to go capitalize on this market opportunity. Who do you have in your corner that helps you kind of run the business?
I don't have a person per se.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I do. I mean, this is a formula. You take it or leave it, right?
Yeah,
But
let's hear it.
it's one of my life hacks. If I can take my hobbies and turn them into business, then I've done something. And one of my great hacks on that is like, there's so much information available on YouTube. Now, don't let me stop there. It's that you can watch this stuff at 2x. So in the evening, if I'm really interested in cryptocurrency is one of the things
And so what you're saying is, let's say there's a 40-minute video, you put it on, play it at 2x speed. Now I consolidate my view in 20 minutes is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I don't have other things going on.
Okay.
Right? Undivided attention.
So you're just listening to the chipmunks.
Yeah, and I'm watching the closed captioning at the bottom.
okay.
And now I'm taking this in. And in my mind, I'm thinking, can I take this and make this a business? So, and if I can, right, if it can reach scale, if there's monthly addressable users and all the active users, all those kind of things, it matters. And then am I motivated enough and do I have the skill sets? And is it at the bottom? I'm excited about the space right now because it's a $1 trillion asset class.
We're talking about crypto right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was $3 trillion. And I just don't know how it's not going to be a $10 trillion asset class, because I've seen growing up the internet come of age, right? Then I saw Google, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and I just don't know how this third coming doesn't occur, right? How this doesn't happen on the third realm. And I've been right about the first two in terms of telling, you know, I got my MBA in 96. Google started as a company in 97. Yeah. Now in my adult life, I've spent more money with Google on behalf of clients. It's got to be closing in on 100 million.
Yep.
I mean, and wow, to think about that, right? Like it's stuff you don't learn in school.
And so how do we envision crypto kind of penetrating our daily lives, right? The reason why Google can command those figures is because probably 98% of Americans,
Yes.
people in the world, visit the site on a daily basis. And so let's talk about how crypto can gain market share and momentum and grow from that 1 trillion in enterprise value to 10 trillion plus.
I think the key is that the technology already exists, right? And you're dealing with antiquated systems within the banking industry. So to me, it becomes inevitable that that migration will occur. The issue right now is regulatory in nature, and I do work with different regulatory groups out of Austin and Washington, D.C. But to that point, when the pandemic happened, I caught up to a course that was being taught at MIT, and so I watched it on YouTube at 2x. It was taught by Gary Gensler, who is now the SEC chairman. And he knew what he was talking about, and it had my attention and focus. And now I'm able to, a couple of years later, work for them, turn them into clients. But I started out by taking tickets at events as a volunteer. You know why? You get to meet everybody. And so, and over time, I'm like helping the speakers and saying, you know, if you had a microphone, more people could hear what you're saying. Because right now you've got people talking over you, talking around you. And so each time I went, I just tried to help not only me get better, like I was willing to do whatever. I pushed boxes around, hand t-shirts out, put name tags and stickers on. But if I could help the community get better and I could help the individuals in the community grow as well, all of a sudden we're doing things. We're making things happen. And so it's been good and healthy in that way. And it's very familiar because I've done it with a tailgate. I've done it with sports teams as a player. I coached grad school at the collegiate level. I coached a women's basketball team for a while. So that process just gets me going.
So let's kind of segue and we'll talk about your crypto career, which it sounds like you picked up at the beginning of COVID, right? And so give me some insight into that journey, that meteoric rise of Bitcoin, of maybe even some of the, the lesser known coins. What was your biggest win that you were able to personally capitalize on during that whole time frame?
So not to get into the specifics of it, right? I don't want to put up a shot of my financial statement and all that, but
I did take my private jet in today.
Yeah. I think there was geography matters in life. And if you look at what happened in Texas, I started investing in 2020. And then in 2021, you probably remember February-ish, there was Winter Storm Uri. Okay. Do you remember that? The cities shut
Not
down.
at all.
We lost. No, you don't.
For us?
Yeah.
Oh, that it was called something?
Yeah,
we just called it the freeze.
The Great Freeze Out.
Okay. Yeah, the freeze of February 2021.
Yeah, the whole state of Texas pretty much went on ice. Okay. And we had, 3 or 4 days, 5 days under freezing. The solar energy producers froze up. The wind production didn't happen because they froze up. And as you fast forward then in April, the Bitcoin miners out of China shut down and made Bitcoin illegal. So all these miners left China and they were looking for places that were supportive of the environment. Hello, Texas, right? We're welcome. We're open to do business. We have a lot of people from states, even much less countries, that come here because we're a welcoming business community. So that was happening as of April. And then you fast forward with all that activity at its core and then reworking the grid, that board went away. There was an interim appointee. You had the price of Bitcoin go from 10 or 15,000 all the way up to 69.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I'm now working with the Texas Blockchain Council to help them put on an event. There's an incredible amount of enthusiasm. It could have been, I would say the peak happened within a month of that event. Mm-hmm. And so that was an incredible growth experience. Now there's been a hangover.
Certainly. So who fed you that intelligence to say, hey, this series of events is happening in China, right? This happened in Texas. Now's the time for me to really kind of double down and maybe even put in my life savings into something that's relatively volatile. What information source were you relying on at the time?
I can't believe I'm sharing this, but you're asking all the right questions. Okay. I knew you would. So I had been watching that class, starting in the pandemic, let's call it May, June, July. In October, I started getting via Substack information from Anthony Pompliano. Okay. And so he was an advocate for, but not over the top. And it was just if I'm going to play in this game, let's play. And probably not unlike you, right? I want to go in. If I'm going to go, if we're going to play, I don't want to be halfway in. We used to say that about whether to get into even Google or Facebook to support for our clients, or even TikTok or Snapchat. Some of these, MySpace, didn't work. But the deal was, we're not going to sit on the fence. When we go all in. Right. And so I want to be in the top 5% of something, or I don't want to do it. I don't want to be in the top 1%, right? The top 5%, because 95 is a really good grade. Yeah. Right. And it gives you a little room, because to get to that perfective level of 99, you're always going to hold back. You're going to be afraid to land the plane. You're not going to be able to take the risk. Right. So I feel like there's a lot of things I can do at 90, 95% and succeed. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a little bit more room. I'm not motivated by a fear of failure. Most people are. So I'm taking off and willing to land.
So I want to come up with an analogy for maybe some of the listeners. So you're telling me, hey, 95's okay. 99, maybe we would have overanalyzed. We would have needed too much information. So to equate it, I'll say, hey, look, if I know I've got a test tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I'm going to barrel down. I'm going to study my ass off for 2 hours. Okay. I know for 2 hours, I'm going to score 94, 95.
Yeah.
Maybe if I studied for 2 weeks, maybe that would have been a 99 or 100.
Right.
Right?
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Right? But you were narrowly focused, consuming that information from experts, right?
On the daily
that you trusted, that you admired, that were credible in that space. And then you created actionable insight, right? Action that yielded very, very favorable results.
Yeah. And now that you mention it, that every morning I'd get up, and he did the Substack where it's written, but it also was spoken. He had a mic like these, and he would speak basically what he had written. I would listen to it at 1.5x and read it below. So this idea that you can multitask, I think it's way overblown. If you can give undivided attention to stuff, you're going to get better results. And that's not just your phone or your
I get what you're saying.
Conference call, your Zoom,
your spouse,
employees, your
kids.
spouse. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's where I You're reading my mind.
100%.
Yeah, you're reading my mind.
Oh, well, as somebody that's divorced, right? I mean, I made a good run, 9+ years.
Okay.
But what I was doing is I was multitasking, right? You have a business that I was building. You insert 3 kids under the age of 4 years old. You've got, oil crashing in 2014 and 15. I was a fucking wreck.
Okay.
And I was just diluting my attention in way too many directions whenever I could have been hyper-focused at maybe just one at a time, right? 8 to 5, let's really focus on the business, right? 5 to 7:30, hey, let's focus on the kids, right? 7:30 to 10, in retrospect, maybe could have put a little focus on the marriage, right? And so it sounds like you've created a little bit of positive balance. I'm looking at this wedding ring on your finger. How long has it been? How long have you made it through?
29 years.
29 years?
Yes. High school sweetheart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I learned how to close the deals with her, I suppose. I asked her to marry me 3 times.
Okay.
So 3rd time was the charm.
There you go.
She said yes. And we've been married ever since. So, I've when a customer tells me no, it's like, you're just saying not yet.
Not yet, right? It's 3 times as par, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
it really
you
is.
got to go 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, good. What do you think moved the needle for the 3rd time?
Wow, that's a great question. I'd want to ask her.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like get the feedback there. Yeah. I think there was some maturity, like when we were 21, 22. Mm-hmm. I think it was more like I was talking too much maybe about what she could do with me instead of what we could do together. Wow. And that may seem naive to somebody who is in today's current environment, but let me assure you, in kind of Gen X, that transitional environment that we were in the 90s, it was a different time. Yeah. And she's ahead of her game, and she helped me up my game.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, when we look at the title of the podcast, The Path to Success, I'll tell you that 29 years is not top 5%, brother. That's top 1%.
Okay.
So
okay.
You put in the hard work for that one.
Yeah, we were friends first. Okay. That was one thing she did before we dated. We were in the friend zone for a long time. There you go. And I said, hey, I don't, this friend thing, I'm over it. Like, I paid my dues on that front, and it's okay if we're not friends. Okay. But I want to be romantic. Yeah. And if we can't be romantic, then I can't be friends. Yeah. Right? Because I got too many other. Yeah.
You got too many options.
Yeah.
TCU baseball player, right?
No, it wasn't like that. It was more like Anthony Michael Hall and
there you
16
go.
Candles. Cue that up into the mix here. You know what I mean? He was attracted, I think, to Molly Ringwald. Absolutely. And Molly was, she had the attention of the senior guys. Absolutely. And I was just this little
she was eating sushi in the mid-'80s before anybody even knew what sushi was,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
That's a little Breakfast Club plug right there.
For
yeah,
sure.
Well, excellent. So great. Thanks for sharing that. 29 years, man, super commendable. And, I just got to say hats off to you. So
one thing I want to add, we do not celebrate big occasions. Okay. We are solid every day. And I think that's a good way to approach whatever you're doing. Okay. Because if Valentine's Day becomes the thing that you try to make up for, and you're going to try to book dinner when all the other crazy people are out there, it's like, it doesn't have to be Valentine's Day. Like, let's not put that emotional load on that occasion. What if every day were Valentine's Day? Yeah. So a little bit of Alice in Wonderland there.
Yeah, well,
the unbirthday.
There we go. Well, thank you for sharing. So you said something a minute ago that kind of resonated with me. You said I was talking maybe a little bit too much about, what she could do for me or what I could do for her, and instead painting the picture of what life would look like together. And I'll give you a quick experience here. So, when I became single in 2019, first couple of years, it was, let me just act wild and get it out of my system. I was coming out of an 11-year-long relationship. And then, here we are, fast forward to 2021, and I was starting to think, okay, maybe it's time to settle down, right? Yeah. And, I went through an exercise with my executive life coach where I built the perfect woman on paper, right?
No way.
Her interests, her love languages, where her parents lived, her every single thing that you can imagine, right?
Okay.
And so as a recruiter, which is what I am, I own a recruiting company.
Yeah.
That was the candidate profile. And it made it very easy for me to say, hey, when I find what I'm looking for, I can stop looking.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think in today's society, this swipe right culture, swipe left culture, we kind of just move on to the next one, move on to the next one. Right. And so that was very, very important for me to become maybe a little bit more serious. But I vividly remember when I met somebody that I was very, very optimistic about. And she was just, she wasn't really engaging as quickly as maybe I would have hoped, right? And I was trying to keep my cards close to the vest. And, I thought, man, like, why wouldn't she want to be with somebody like me, right? Emotionally intelligent, successful, XYZ. And then my life coach told me something that's very, very valuable, and it's stuck with me ever since. He said, Jeremy, it's much more valuable to be interested than be interesting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh.
I was going around telling everybody how cool I was, how successful I was, XYZ. And the recipe for success was to be genuinely interested in getting to know the person on the other end of the table, right? And then when I shifted that mindset to being interested, boy, you'd be surprised at how many people became interested in me.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It is powerful.
Subtly, incredibly powerful.
And so how can we translate that to business, right? With our business development efforts, with our prospective clients. I think everybody's so focused on being interesting, right? Best places to work, fastest growing, XYZ. But when we look at client engagement and prospecting efforts, maybe what are some strategies that we can utilize to just show our prospects that we're interested? Does that really apply at all?
I do. I think, they talk about product market fit, but in a service industry, if you don't have client agency alignment, you're just going to create so much friction that's not worth it. So the one good thing about the ability to create content in the ways that we're able to create content now, people can find out what you're about or what I'm about through podcasts like this and other means and mechanisms that can help them determine if they're attracted to what it is that we're capable of supporting them with and for and on. Use all the prepositions. But at the beginning of the relationship, I have learned, and what a lot of people will learn, is that you get punished if you put bad deals together. And people immediately go to like a financial or accounting place. Yes, there are financial and accounting. But I think there's also like the financial accounting piece, but also the personality piece, right? Because if somebody's going to create a lot of friction for your associates or your team, or you're going to now have, who knows what, you could have them not paying bills on time. They think it's funny. They could create HR issues because they're saying things they shouldn't be saying. You can have, I know this, we hired a low revenue, high maintenance client. And so I always looked at the number of hours spent versus the amount of revenue. And so when you're 2% of the revenue and you're 30% of the time, you're out of balance, man. You got to go fix things. Mm-hmm. So I think the things we're talking about at a relationship level transcend to a business people. And then I'll close it quickly with this. Who likes to be around people you don't like working with? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done it. 8 hours a day. Most of your waking hours are spent with people that you're engaging with on a business level. Mm-hmm. And for a guy like you or a guy like me who spends a lot of time taking care of business, I mean, that quickly becomes 10, it becomes 12. You're now going to a basketball game, playing a round of golf. Who knows what? Do I really 4-hour dinner? Right? Yeah. Like with somebody you don't like. So I just found over time, once you reach that point in your life where you can, for whatever reason, decide to or not to work with people. It doesn't mean they have to be like you. Doesn't mean they need to think like you. Mm-hmm. In fact, diversity is a great thing. Certainly. But you got to be able to say, hey, you know what? You're pushing my people too hard, or...
And I think it goes on the other side of the desk too. I mean, who wants to work with a colleague that they don't personally get along with or like, right?
Yeah.
I think for so long in business, the recipe for success was to hire, technically competent people.
Yeah.
Right. And, we kind of almost disregarded their, interpersonal skills or maybe their gratitude or certain,
It's a lot of
character and
leeway.
integrity things. Right. And to where now, when you look at business over the last 5 years, and I don't know what really inspired it, but there's this massive shift towards culture alignment, right? And you almost hire to the core values and not necessarily to the skill set or technical expertise. Give me some insight into maybe how, culture has been a driver inside of one of your companies.
Well, I will tell you, and I'm going to flip the script here real quickly, if you allow me, is that when I walked into your building here in Houston in the energy corridor, you've got your values on the wall in a word cloud, and it's pretty awesome. We went through that process of building values. I know one of mine was competition, and it's probably the one we align with because I noticed that. But you had like 6 others. Do you want to share any of them or talk about? Since this is your podcast, and values are incredibly important, and attraction and alignment matter, and values is where that all starts.
Absolutely. And so, I own a recruiting company, and so the profitability of my organization is driven off of companies that want to hire experienced people that we poach and headhunt from their direct competitors, right? It shortens training. It they're able to hit the ground running immediately. They're able to bring new ideas, fresh ideas, and create a profitable impact for our clients. On the other side of that token, that's just not something that we do. We don't want to hire people from our competition. We feel like we are best in class. We have the best people, we have the best processes, and we have the best system. And so because of that, we get winners that fit the core values that are early to mid-career, right? And we come in, they learn our process, and they drink the Kool-Aid, right? So when you look at our values, it's things like excellence, resilience, gratitude, professionalism, competitiveness, meticulousness. And coachability, right? Those are our core values. To where, if I get somebody that has strong work ethic, somebody that's coachable, meticulous, and they continually strive for the pursuit of excellence, I don't give a shit if they were selling insurance. I don't care if they were a retail manager at Vitamin World, right? I don't care if they were a restaurant manager at Pappas. If they eat, sleep, and breathe those core values each and every day, they're going to be successful in our environment. And so that's the reason why those values are the lifeblood of our organization.
It worked like a force field for me. It also helped keep people out.
Exactly.
I mean, right? I was asking,
100%. Right? I mean, there are times where, in an interview, we've talked about, how we've had to, let go of somebody because they were continually putting the wrong time zone, right? Whenever they were sending calendar invites for people, right? And it's like, that's not meticulous. And to somebody who may not value that as much, honest mistake, right? They'll say, God damn, man, that's micromanaging. Wow, you're an asshole. You know what I'm saying?
No, I just missed my flight, and now I'm staying overnight in Detroit.
Exactly. It's a flagrant violation of a company core value. It doesn't matter, how minute or how massive you think it is. It's just not something that happens at Encore Search Partners. And so because we're so upfront and transparent, even during the recruiting process and interview process, people do self-select out, right? But whenever they see the culture through our video content production, content marketing on, LinkedIn and various other social media resources, the people that gravitate towards it really, really gravitate towards it, right? And so it took me probably 10 years to create that culture, right? That culture of accountability and that Kool-Aid drinking, right? So that's been instrumental to our growth and success, is not necessarily relying on the intellectual capital of others and being very hyper focused on following our process, our system, and then really breeding those values inside of these 4 walls.
Yeah. And what's great too? Like when I saw it on the wall, I'm like, first off, I got a sense of where you were. Second off, I knew what you stood for. Third off, I'm like, I can feel comfortable about recommending him and his team to other people, right? And so I was like, I get it. And so I think that happens too. One of the best things, I got to share this very quickly. Yeah. One of my associates wrote a blog post and it was the five reasons why you might not be a good fit for local search group. Okay. And I had people read it. It's so counterintuitive. But I don't want to
go write that down. We need to put the 5 reasons why someone's not a fit for Encore Search.
And when you have people read it, like they opt out. And you know what? You thank them. Yeah. Because you don't want to hire somebody, onboard them, train them, and there's just like this internal friction that's keeping them from being who it is that can help the company be the best that it can be, and it's also keeping them from being the best person that they can be. Because in the growth scenarios that I enjoy empowering people with and helping people achieve, I got to help them find their best place. And the cool thing, the okay thing, it may not be with us. In fact, for a while, we had a lot of people that came on board with us that ended up doing work for charitable organizations. We just weren't a charity. What they're doing, and they've been working there for 7 years, but because one of our values of the 7 C's that we had, the letter C, was charity and giving back, and we would do things with like the Houston SPCA. And they moved on, and they were able to cultivate something inside themselves that they took from where we were to where they can help in a way that they and their family support. That nothing makes me prouder, right? And
and they're raving fans of your organization and those 7 years that they spent with you, right? But they just, over the course of time, they migrated towards that 1 C, right? Yeah, nothing wrong with it. That's why it's very important to develop a brand where high-value individuals want to come work for, right? Because when you have that brand, that's really what kind of, helps them gravitate towards you, right? So I want to ask you this. It sounds like, you've been successful in a variety of different arenas. I'll just reiterate: local search group, crypto investing, obviously your family life. Give me some insight into like what resources you've utilized as far as like advisors or mentors or things of that nature. Or was it really just something that you just figured out on your own?
So, no, I didn't figure it out on my own. I'm, again, willing to get back up. But I think one of the greatest speeches I ever heard was Nick Saban, the head football coach at Alabama. And he gave a speech in a room of about 75, 100 people. He owns a dealership a Mercedes-Benz dealership. Okay. So he was at a car conference talking about all things football. And he said, I want you guys to know that when I know that I have athletes that want to go to the NFL and want to get education, I got them, right? I got them. He said, but what I was struggling with was where was I going to be? And if your goal in life, and he's just telling it to the room, he said, if your goal in life is to go to the beach and eat bonbons, then you really aren't doing business, right? Especially in football. So I had to go talk to a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And yeah, guys, I said it. The psychologist, you just talk to problems about. The psychiatrist, they prescribe things, right? To be where I am, I needed both of those things to help me grow and get better and go where I'm going. Now, I don't have a psychiatrist. If I did, I'd tell you. I sometimes I probably wish I did, but I don't have a psychologist on the daily, but sometimes you run into things in life that you're just not equipped to handle. And I want to be clear. There are resources available that can help you work through the issues, help you solve for the issues. And on a business level, I do have what I call a business coach that I have met with 50 weeks out of the year for 10 years. And so that part of your relationship with your family and spouse, the thrill ride that we're on, they don't need to hear all about that all the time. Or at least that's what mine told me.
Yeah.
And I was like,
totally agree with that.
And I was about to say, but wait, I want you to see what I did, right? But wait, there was this high and this low, the volatility. What about it? I mean, do you realize? No, that was freedom they gave me, right? So that isn't what excited them or attracted them to me. And so I had to reevaluate and say, wait a second. They gave me an incredible gift. I just need to have somebody that I can vent to, offload on, strategize with, regroup, afterglow with about some of the business things that were happening. Because I had a board and they were complex. And so I couldn't see some of the things that were right in front of me. We have 2 eyes, but they don't help us see ourselves. And so I had to get to a place where I could address the board, develop concepts with the board, win the board, deliver to the market, win the clients, take care of employees, do the life,
Absolutely.
Without a coach, I'd have been lost. So I mean, I don't know that you need, I mean, a life coach, whatever, but I was talking to somebody who knew my business and I could trust and be myself. And see, you said it earlier in the podcast. I don't know who caught it, but you talked about vulnerability. And so to be successful, and it's wicked because most people don't trust people, and business will teach you that a lot of people aren't trustworthy. But no matter how many times you learn that lesson, you have to continue to be vulnerable. And it's a hard one for me, but it's real, right? And so part of that failing is that willingness to be vulnerable, right? Because if you want the big wins, you're going to take some hits.
Oh, absolutely. Don't I know it, man?
Yeah, I
know,
mean-
you talk about vulnerability. I'll tell you that's been somewhat of a superpower that I've developed maybe over the last 3 years. And, maybe one contributor to that was, going through a divorce and having the humility to do the self-work to realize where did I go wrong? And then, just saying, I fucked up, and it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it happened over a multi-year period of time. And I was so overly concerned with, people liking me and people, wanting to do business with me. And I would really like triple think content before I put it out on LinkedIn. And then one day I realized that if I'm my true, vulnerable, open, honest, and authentic self, yeah, sure, maybe 10% of the followers are going to self-select out. But those 90% of the people that stick around are really going to like gravitate towards that commentary, right? And develop a relationship with that persona. And then another thing that I started to realize is when people would meet me and they'd hang out with me, they'd say, holy shit, you're like the same person that's on social media. And I'm like, yeah, go figure. Because people would say like, oh, who does your content? Who does your content? I'm like, me when I'm on the toilet at home, I'm not doing it there during 8 to 5 during business hours thinking, okay, what's my content development strategy? But it's real stories with real life events and vulnerability and honesty and, celebrating the wins, but more importantly, having the humility to admit the lows. I think that's whenever people really started to gravitate towards that business person that I am online, right? So I do want to ask you, what is the best piece of advice that you would personally give 25-year-old you?
Oh boy. At 20, I'm probably a workaholic.
Okay. Still?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get too much out of it. Like when I'm able to craft a list and like knock things off, I feel way too good about it. Okay. And so I wouldn't trade anything. Like I don't have regrets. And I think that's the thing. In fact, I have this saying about advice that you really shouldn't give it because the wise don't need it and the foolish won't heed it. And so I try not to. Now, don't get me wrong. People that know me are going to be like, oh, Jim, that's not true. You told me if I did this, this would happen, and I appreciate you. Yeah, after I spent some time with you and we've talked a lot and you're still kind of like marinating and you're thinking and you're like playing I do this strategic game in our mind. Mm-hmm. Do they love me? Do they love me not? Right? We pick flowers as children, like picking and that's kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not a good place to be. So I kind of like I said, don't sit on the fence. I would tell my 25-year-old self this, right? Don't
create swift, meaningful action, right? Don't sit on the fence. Make a decision.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of failure.
Corporations, just so you know, are built to eliminate failure. Agencies, service industries are built to establish growth. What you do helps people grow. What I do helps people grow. When I talk to people that are in corporations, they don't necessarily like that the first time I say it, but it's true, and I live that life. And here's how I know. And Toyota was a great experience, but I would be responsible for incentives, right, in a marketing capacity. And we would have a team that would get together of middle managers. We'd come up with a plan. We'd present it to the VPs. And for example, there was a new Tundra plant that was built in San Antonio. When you'd go off and you'd get the $1,000 incentive that you'd recommend, you'd want to get the truck manager to buy off too, because the truck manager said, no, all that work before, Then you'd get, let's say, the truck manager on board. Then you want to get the marketing director on board. Then you'd get the marketing VP on board, like signature-wise, right? Then you go get the general manager of operations on board. You'd go get the president on board. And here's where I knew. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Do you know who the last person to sign off was?
CEO.
No. Lawyer.
Lawyer.
And if the lawyer said no, right? He read the script or there's something wrong. You had to go back to route one and you had to start that whole process over. And so what do lawyers do? They prevent risk.
Certainly.
So I knew, and that was okay, right? That wasn't, I couldn't, and that's the other thing. I mean, I'm not that I'm giving advice, but look at the top of the organization and you'll know most of what you need to know. Because if you are a marketing person and you're going to work for an engineering company, or, the top of the organization comes from an engineering background, that's not going to change, right? If you want to do marketing things, go work for somebody who has a marketing background that's at the top.
Absolutely.
Or vice versa. Whatever your skill set is that you want to become better at, look at who's at the top and what background they have. And if it aligns with what you want to do with your future, you're going to have a hell of a ride. It's going to be a good time.
No, that's a great point. People look at that's a great point. I know for 10 years I was married to an engineer.
Oh, yeah?
And, she does failure analysis all day, right?
Oh,
How can it fail? How can it go wrong, right? A very glass half empty mentality. And then you look at us as entrepreneurs, I mean, we're serial optimists.
Yeah.
What is the market opportunity? How much market share can I steal? How can I put $1 in and get $2 out, right?
Exactly.
And the engineering mindset is, what's the risk? How can it fail, right? These are the expenses, right?
Did you have the yes/no decision trees and like little charts?
Unfortunately, I didn't. I just made the decisions and had to apologize for it later without getting approval. I found that it was easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, right? But
makes sense.
In the grand scheme of things, that is a recipe for disaster, right? Whenever
over time,
over time, for sure. And so I want to ask you another question. And so, it's been really awesome getting to know you over the last hour or so. But I want to ask you one thing. What is the biggest misconception that people have about you?
So again, we don't see as well with our two eyes because we're always looking outward. We're better at evaluating others than we are evaluating ourselves. But like you, I've done some heavy lifting to sort through and sift through that. And I think what I found was that through surveys and working with a coach, I wasn't having the responses I was wanting to have from the people I was interacting with. There was typically an initial growth phase that was very exciting, but people had a tendency to wear out or burn out because of the energy level that I was bringing. And so I can talk too much. So I know how to be quiet now.
Oh, interesting.
I know how to listen better.
When did you figure that out? And then what was a byproduct of you making the decision to maybe listen more than you speak?
My words mattered more. Everything I said had greater power. I wasn't trying to blurt like I did when I was 28 or 29 and working with people that were 25 years my senior in a Toyota corporate marketing environment, sales environment, right? I had to be so strong wrong that when I was soft right, I didn't think people listened. And I realize now I can be soft right. And boy, does it work, right? You let all the, it's like a dust up. Like you see all these arguments and this, that, and what if we do and what if we do? And you just kind of make sure you're hearing everybody. And I'm able to distill it calmly, correctly, productively.
Fantastic.
See, I feel calmer now. Don't you?
Oh, woosah. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, good. So kind of in closing,
sure.
Give us some insight into maybe a piece of advice for the listeners, right? If we're saying that we all want to pay attention to people that have experienced that path to success, what are some of the behaviors that they can start implementing today in order to achieve their goals, whether it's in business or fitness or relationships or whatnot? What is something that you feel, and I know you said you don't really like to give advice, but maybe an experience share for them on something that they can start doing today that can help them lead to their own path to success?
One of the things that I'm honored you had me on, I'll call this your prototype podcast.
Absolutely.
So what I found with anything that's going on, if you can do one thing right, like if you get that first podcast done, and then you do the improvement from the first podcast to the second podcast is going to be substantial. But make sure you spend the time to do the first thing well and right. Do it again, then you can scale out to 10.
Yeah.
But man, don't come in and try to do like 100 things at once. Like if you're building an app, don't put it out to everybody, and understand that you probably have a group of people that are going to support you when you ask them to evaluate what you're doing. There's going to be a group of people that are going to judge you, and there's going to be a group of people that are constructive. If you're really good, you're able to go to those right people at the right time. Yep. You do not give the judgmental people the stuff when you're building it out. You give it to them when it's refined and it needs a refresh, and it's going to get an uptick with their insight. But at the beginning, just like websites, just like children, you've got to invest the time and energy to help make something grow and be productive. And with that, you can, you just immediately move ahead of all the others that don't.
Excellent. That's some amazing feedback and insight for the listeners, man. I just want to say thank you for coming out all the way to our office today, Jim. Thought it was a very valuable hour that I personally spent, and I learned a lot.
No, I appreciate your time, and I feel like I'm getting to know you. I can't wait to learn more and know more, and I'm excited to know more about your company too. Like, I sincerely appreciate what you're doing and what you're building here in Houston, in Texas.
Excellent. Well, you got me all excited whenever you mentioned El Tiempo whenever we got started. So
let's go. Drinks. Drinks on me. Thanks, man.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah.